Every financial crisis ends with the same scene. Politicians step in front of cameras. Bankers put on serious faces. "We're introducing new regulations," they say. And the classic line follows. "Don't worry. We've learned our lesson. The system is now safer." But history shows us something else. The laws written after collapses are often not designed to protect you, but to protect the system, meaning the banks. The names change, the eras change, the crises change, but the pattern does not. The system is not broken. The system is designed. 1844. Who controls the power to print money? In the 19th century, England experienced frequent banking panics. Banks printed their own banknotes, credit expanded rapidly, and then panic erupted. The solution presented. The Bank Charter Act of 1844. The public was told, "We will stabilize the currency." What actually happened? The Bank of England's monopoly over money issuance was reinforced. Smaller banks were pushed out of the system. Competition decreased. This was not primarily about protecting ordinary depositors. It strengthened the dominant central institution. Crisis reform once again centralized power. The U.S. Civil War and national banking. In the 1860s, during the American Civil War, the government desperately needed money. The solution? The National Banking Acts. The public story. We are creating a safer and unified monetary system. The reality. If banks wanted to issue banknotes, they had to purchase government bonds. In other words, the government turned banks into automatic financiers of its own debt. A clever move. Integrate public debt into the monetary system and present it as public safety. Who benefited? Banks whose intermediary role was now guaranteed. 1933, the Great Depression and public anger. Thousands of banks collapsed. People lost their savings. Anger filled the streets. Something had to be done. The Glass-Steagall Act separated commercial banking from investment banking. The message was clear. Your bank will no longer gamble on Wall Street. For a while, it worked. But it also did something deeper. It restored trust in the system. Few ask the more fundamental question. Why are banks this large and powerful in the first place? Instead, the public was told, "Don't worry. We've restrained them." Over time, lobbying intensified. By the 1990s, the law was effectively weakened. A few years later, another crisis arrived. Deposit insurance, protection, or incentive. That same year, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, was established. The promise to the public. If your bank fails, your money is safe. Sounds reassuring. But it had another effect. Before deposit insurance, people paid attention to what their banks were doing. Risky banks lost customers. After FDIC, a new psychology emerged. The government has my back. This opened space for banks to take greater risks. If losses occurred, they would be socialized. What was presented as protection became an invisible subsidy. Gold confiscation, 1933. After the Emergency Banking Act of 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt declared a bank holiday. Citizens were then required to surrender their gold to the government. The public narrative. A necessary sacrifice to save the economy. What actually happened? Hard assets were absorbed into the system. The financial structure was reinforced. Again, the same pattern. The language of protection, the consolidation of the system. 2008, the clearest modern example. The mortgage bubble burst. A global crisis began. Millions lost their homes. Jobs disappeared. In the United States, the response was the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP. The message: we are saving the economy. The reality: homeowners faced foreclosure. Small businesses closed. Retirement funds shrank. But large banks, they were rescued with taxpayer money. Once again, the priority was clear. System equals banks. Europe, who paid the bill? Ireland. Spain. Greece. Bank debts were transformed into sovereign debt. In Greece, while hospitals and schools faced cuts, foreign banks were repaid on their bonds. In 2012, the European Stability Mechanism was created. It was presented as a safety net for the Eurozone. In practice, banks were stabilized. The costs were imposed on citizens: austerity, privatization, tax increases. The principle became permanent. Banks are rescued. Society pays. Basel rules, global regulation, or loophole. Starting in the 1980s, the Basel Accords were introduced to limit risk. In practice, they created sophisticated ways for large banks to move risk off their balance sheets. Government-backed assets were labeled low risk. On paper, safety. In reality, maneuvering room. The uncomfortable truth: financial laws are not neutral. They are written by governments in cooperation with banks to preserve the system. Because if the system collapses, governments cannot borrow. Wars cannot be financed. Political careers end. The system is sacred. You matter as long as you provide trust and tax revenue. Is today any different? Central banks raise interest rates. We are protecting you from inflation. But what is truly being protected? The stability of the currency and the credit system. Deposit insurance says your money is safe. But your incentive to question banks decreases. Bailout packages say we are protecting jobs. But what is really protected are balance sheets. So what's the lesson? Every law creates winners and losers. And most of the time, the winners are banks. The losers are those who believed the promise. This does not mean everything is a conspiracy. It means this: question the language of protection. Ask, who benefits? True financial freedom does not come from blindly trusting the system. It comes from understanding how it works. In the 19th century, kings were indebted. Today, individuals are indebted to credit cards. The rhyme is the same. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And in this rhyme, the chorus never changes. A crisis comes. A law is passed. We are protecting you, they say. But what is truly protected are the banks. If you do not want to be crushed under the next protection law, you must understand the system. Because money is not just a tool. It is power. And those who do not understand power are eventually ruled by it.